Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jack Callow with episode 4 of The Exchange. Today we have a special guest with us today. Well, recently elected state representative. If you'd like, please tell us your name and where you've been career-wise.
Hello, I'm Joanna Poole. You might also know me by my previous name, Joanna Grath. I've been a citizen of San Andreas for 3 years next month. I started my career in law enforcement, being fortunate enough to be in the first academy in the state. I left there as a detective sergeant with MCD and went on to serve as a public defender, a state attorney in the Department of Justice, the secretary of the 5th Congress of San Andreas, and I am currently an associate justice with the judiciary. However, I'll be going on a leave of absence here shortly to serve as Speaker of the Legislature for the 9th Congress.
You have been to a lot of different departments. So between us and the audience, is there any department you had a more enjoyable time working for over the others?
I think I enjoyed myself the most as a detective. It's a very hands-on job that allowed me to tangibly feel like I was making a difference in my community. It's a lot of critical thinking and trying to find solutions to problems. And I really enjoyed the people I worked with. It wasn't all rainbows and butterflies, though, which is the reason I left in the first place. But it's the job I look back the most fondly on. If I had to rank my prior jobs from most enjoyable to least enjoyable, I'd have to say MCD, the judiciary, PPO, state rep, and then the Department of Justice.
So, between your previous stints in law enforcement, how would you compare it to your time as a judge?
It's of course a lot more laid back. Not being shot at constantly. But I feel that obviously my decisions hold so much more weight. I get to interact with a lot more citizens in a positive way, which is really nice, as people don't really like cops much in general for both good and bad reasons. But I feel like my time as an officer prepared me to look at cases that law enforcement present to the court a lot more carefully, as I know the details are important and the evidence is needed to secure a conviction. I see a lot of excellently presented cases and a lot of poor ones. And it's important to ensure all the evidence is presented to ensure that criminals answer for their crimes and innocent people are not imprisoned by mistake or even worse, on purpose. There are a lot of lives at stake, and it makes me take my job that much more seriously.
Wonderful answer. So, that being said, a little bird tells me you're writing a memoir.
I am.
Is there anything in particular we can look forward to? Any juicy details inside, of all your different careers you've had?
I've put it on pause while making preparations for Congress. But whenever I start it up again, it's I look back at all the hats I've worn in government and how they affect how I do and see things today. I've had a lot of my world shaken and my worldview shaped a few times. And this has been a bit of self-therapy to ground myself again. It's going to include things like my time chasing serial killers, creating a government department with just 2 people and what that whole thing was like, and my love-hate relationship with law enforcement through all of it. I also want people to read, whoever reads the book to be able to understand a bit more of who I am, so they can form their own opinion about who it is they vote for or see serving them in government, wherever I might end up. People don't have to like me, and if they don't, I want them to be able to know exactly who I am before deciding they don't. But all in all, this is mostly a bit of a love letter to friends and family over the years. I want to put these memories into the universe so I can move on and kind of take my life in a more positive direction. As for the tea, I'm planning on putting in my own opinions about a few people and departments very candidly. I've always kind of tried to be pretty diplomatic about things in the public eye. But this book is for me, and I think it would be a waste if it was all rainbows and butterflies and praises on everybody and everything.
I'd ask for a little sneak peek on who exactly you're talking about, but I have a feeling you're not going to tell us, huh?
I will say, in particular, my struggles working with police high command over the years.
Ooh,
That'll probably be the biggest one.
that's going to be a lot of fun to read. And you have spoken pretty fondly on your time in law enforcement, your time at the Department of Justice and a judge, but previously you did work for a legislative branch of the government. Are there any moments from back then that stood out to you? Was there anything you found particularly frustrating that you maybe intend to change this time around? Because if I remember correctly, this was during the time of the Committee of Oversight, wasn't it?
I really liked the amount of communication I could have with government departments about what they needed and how to serve the community. Whenever I first served as a representative, um, however, if I'm being honest, I found that being a representative was incredibly frustrating. It's never easy to work with a board. Uh, I still have to do it in the Supreme Court, and it's still just as annoying because you have to rely on other people being on time, being part of the discussion, and on things. This results in some things taking longer than they should, or someone not understanding a point you want to make, or not bothering to listen at all. Sometimes life happens and we can't always be on time or give something all of our attention. It's hard to come to a consensus on matters because everyone has a different opinion, which I'm not saying is bad, but it can be difficult. This is the way of politics, though, and without those tough decisions, progress can't really happen. So it's a lot to juggle. I wasn't planning on running for state representative again, but I saw the nominees for the legislature this term, and I wanted to help by lending the experience that I did have. As for the Committee on Oversight, I felt like I'm not opposed to oversight by any means, but I think it was a bit more than what was needed, or kind of being nitpicky, in my opinion. I think definitely there are ways to do it, but I think it was just a little bit too much.
So, given the time with the Committee of Oversight, do you feel like there might be too much oversight right now with legislative and executive, or not enough in comparison to back then?
I'm not sure they need necessarily more oversight, but more checks and balances. I feel like this previous term, the legislative and executive branches were pitted against each other, and they stepped on each other's toes a lot. I think there could be more checks to ensure that one is not doing the job of the other, but so that they can hold each other accountable. I think that's the big thing, is making sure that one department does not have more power than another one, and that they are answering to each other as best they can.
And what would be your thoughts on the current state of the government departments in regards to how to communicate with civilians on government matters? Do you feel like they have trouble? What's the word? Trouble reaching civilians, like they're not being transparent enough, or maybe they're giving away too much. And do you have any ideas on how you would try to improve that connection between government departments and the civilian populace that they serve?
I think that we've come a long way from when we first started, but we still have a long road ahead of us. Things have definitely gotten better with the introduction of FOIA requests and initiatives of prior representatives and governors to make things more transparent. But these can always be expanded upon. It's always been a balance of trying to take into consideration safety, when to be discreet, because that does have to happen, but also when to be transparent. I also think a lot of people confuse transparency with communication. Some things might be available to the public to know already, but they don't know where to find it. Fixing this will lend aid to the issue of the public being aware of what's happening around them from a government standpoint, and allow more people to voice where they want more information if it can be given. We're not going to know unless we actually talk to people and figure out, okay, what can we reasonably be able to share? And what things should be kept under wraps, just more so as a safety concern.
So that could be something we improve upon then, just the way people find information in regards to the government.
Absolutely.
That's actually rather enlightening because I do believe you're right about that. Right now, it's pretty difficult to find where to look for certain information. There's not exactly a publicly available like transcript that the government puts out for the people that's easily accessible after all.
I think it's even if that was available, a lot of people just don't want to read it, or they will read it if it applies only to them, but then it might apply to them later on. I think if we find ways to communicate in ways that people are already comfortable with, unfortunately, things like why being one of them, or posters being put up in public places, directly reaching out to people, be like, hey, this might affect you. You might want to take a look. I think all of that would be a lot more helpful.
Or even audio transcriptions.
Yeah.
People can listen on the way up to Polito and everything, you know?
I think if we are able to do that, I think that would be a great way to go. I personally, and this is me speaking directly to the problem, I personally haven't listened to Governor Key's his videos that he's put out. I've listened to a little bit of them, but I haven't sat down and listened to the whole thing. Because I didn't have the time, or it didn't interest me, or because I didn't think it affected me. But it might affect other people. It might affect me in the future. It's kind of a give and take. Am I going to put in the time to willingly look over these things that government's doing? But also, it has to be available to me to even review in the first place.
That being said, you've been in this state for quite a while now. As you said, coming up 3 years now. You've worked across multiple departments. If you can prove one thing, let's assume that there's no department that's off limits, right? To any proposed change you'd want to make. What would you try to make better and why?
I think law enforcement is the one that needs the most change. I think they're the most public-facing department that we have. I'm not saying they're doing a bad job, but a few bad eggs, some outdated processes or laws are making it difficult for citizens to have faith that officers are doing their jobs competently and fairly. I'm not looking to completely overhaul it, but I think some honest conversations about why things are the way that they are, and if compromise can be had or new processes can be tried. Nothing's ever set in stone, and if things don't work, they can be changed again. I'd rather people feel safe and know someone will have their back rather than be afraid or like they're in constant danger. Like, if we're being honest, San Andreas is a city rife with crime, but that doesn't mean that cops are the good guys as they should be, that everyone is a criminal, or that things can't be better.
You know, you're one of the first people to actually answer that question honestly.
I try to be honest as much as I can.
No, it's because everyone else that I've asked that question to during these interviews has always danced around it, you know?
I think it's the biggest topic of conversation right now is law enforcement. Like,
yeah, but no one wants to willingly put that, I guess you could say, metaphorical crosshair on their own back, you know?
I'm not really scared about putting a crosshair on my back necessarily. If I did, if we don't have these difficult conversations, then nothing gets changed.
And that right there is very important for Sarah to do, to have those difficult conversations. I just hope the rest of them follow suit.
Yeah, like I might have close connections in PD, but that doesn't mean I always agree with them. Just like you don't always agree with a friend or family member. Might do things that you just don't particularly agree with, but you care about it enough to say, hey, there's a problem. I think we need to fix it. Obviously, we have people that are protesting, or they're making complaints, or they're not bothering to make complaints because they don't know that they're being heard. And I think that speaks volumes to the fact that there needs to be some sort of change, but it doesn't mean that we have to completely dismantle something to fix it. It makes small steps to make it better rather than worrying about taking huge leaps and bounds and causing all sorts of issues.
Well, of course, you don't cut down the whole tree because just one root happens to be a little sick.
Exactly.
You just take care of the root issue. But it's also a complex issue. It's very understandable that, cops under a lot of pressure. And that's probably never going to change, but I feel like it shouldn't lead to there being this hostile view, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I I hate seeing former colleagues face a lot of criticisms when they in particular might not have been the culprit of it, but also as an overall department there are things that need to be fixed because collectively it's becoming a problem. If people feel strongly enough to protest because they feel like they're not being treated fairly, it's important to listen to them. You're not going to be able to make everyone happy, but compromise is always something that you can to a consensus on. It's give and take. Some people are not going to be happy about it, but that's kind of how it works.
You gotta have the difficult conversation one way or another.
That's right.
That being said, what's your aim as state rep going into the new term? Like, what's your focus on?
I intend primarily to put in place tools for future representatives to use so that they have resources to go to when they need help. Like pretty much every government department or branch has some sort of guidelines to follow, or SOPs, if you will. All of them except for the legislature. um, I intend to make these guidelines and resources available to the public also because it's already public. It's just not in one, easy to find place that people can just reference. It's important that they understand the legislative process that much easier. I also intend to try and step out of my comfort zone that I very obviously have within government and get to know citizens better. The last time I was in Congress, I wrote and co-wrote a lot of government-facing bills. But I want to focus more efforts on things that will improve the quality of life for more people than just government departments. In my mind, I rationalized it before that if I improve a department by giving them tools they need to function, they'll be able to serve the public better. But I've always struggled a bit more to go directly to the source. I like to try and change that. I know a lot of people assume that I'm on the side of law enforcement because I was a cop 2 years ago, and because I have friends there, but also I've been mistreated by cops as well. I've been in their shoes. I've been frustrated with them, but I use the relationships I do have with law enforcement and with other departments to better relate and communicate with them. If they feel more comfortable around me, the more likely they will voice their frustrations or be willing to have civil conversations about what can and cannot be done for them legally to do their jobs. I also hope to work with law enforcement again to have discussions about improving their IA processes. I understand recently this has changed to be a bit more transparent, and I'm grateful that law enforcement has shown they're willing to compromise, but I think we can do it a little bit better.
So that actually was a bit of a concern that I gathered from civilians. They were rather worried that you would lean rather heavily towards pushing bills for law enforcement over the people.
I mean, let's be honest. I think in every Congress we've ever had, typically there are certain representatives, myself included, I will admit, that will push bills that benefit a department they might have been part in, or a social group they might have been part of, or an issue that has directly affected them that they felt strongly enough to write a bill about. I don't think it's necessarily a matter of favoritism or anything of that sort. It's a matter of they've been directly in those shoes and they've seen an issue and want to fix it. With law enforcement, I like hold, it's something very dear to me. It also kills me to see some of the things that go through my courtroom. Things that I'm like, man, they could have done so much better with this. Or they did an excellent job here. I wish every officer did it like this. Just because, again, I might hold some of them dearly and everything, or look back at my time there fondly, it doesn't mean that they're always right. There's a lot of times they're wrong. They've been wrong to me. I've had officers say to my face, why would I take this warrant to you when I could go to a different judge and they're going to give me my warrant because their burden of proof isn't so high? Or Why should we use your prosecutors as DOJ? When you're just going to throw out our cases, what's to stop us using one of our officers to prosecute? Things like that. Um, it's made me really angry and frustrated. And, I'm not always going to be on the side of a department that has both cared a lot for me, but also spat in my face. I can't say that I'm always going to, be hands off with the department I might have been in. There's so many departments that I've, been a part of. It's hard not to write bills that affect them because I've seen the issues that they have.
That's probably one of the most fair answers I've heard in probably any interview I've done, if I'm generally honest.
I don't think it's worth trying to defend somebody all the time. They have to kind of stand on their own. Police have to stand on their own. They can't rely on me to always be on their side. I'm going to try and treat them fairly, just as I try to treat everyone fairly. But not everyone's going to agree that I am, especially law enforcement. They might say that, I, I've been told as PDO that I went to the dark side because I was defending instead of prosecuting for the state. I'm not on any one side. I'm on the side of trying to make things better because I've lived it. I've seen both sides of things. I might not be a criminal with an extensive background or anything or like a criminal record, but I can still see the issues that they're seeing. I can see the issues that cops are seeing too in other government departments.
Do you feel this might draw some of their ire, like hearing you be so honest and open about your issues with not just them but judges as well?
I'm sure it will, but at this point, I don't care. I've drawn their ire, from civilians to criminals to people in government. They've expressed at one point or another that I've angered them or I'm making a bad call. But again, you can't make everyone happy, and you can't always take all of that personally. Like, yeah, it might hurt, but that's why we're doing this, to have the hard conversations.
That genuine honesty, like I said, it's not something I'm used to during these interviews. Everyone's so politically correct, if that makes sense. They try to toe that line.
Day to day, if it's someone I don't know, sure. I'm like I said, pretty diplomatic, but the people that take the time to come and conversate with me, I try to be open and honest about how I feel about certain situations. Unless I can't, like, being a judge, certain things you can't publicly give an opinion on.
No, obviously, of course. And so, as we get to the end of this interview, do you have any closing remarks for the people out there who are listening?
I figure by the time that this is released, it'll probably be after the election. If you voted, thank you. Please feel free to sit down with me, though you haven't technically voted for me, and hold me accountable for what I'd, say I'd like to do this term, and let me know when I'm falling short. Otherwise, I'm not going to know whether or not I'm doing a good job. I guess the only shout I really want to give is the ones that have kind of pushed me to have these convictions and think the way that I do. So shout out to Sally and George. I love you to the moon and back. And for my new friends, thank you for your guidance and your patience. Since we don't have the debates or campaigning this term, I'd like to encourage my fellow representatives moving into office here soon to consider reaching out or at least letting the public know what you want to accomplish. I'm looking forward to being a legislator again, despite my previous experience. And I'm looking forward to trying to make it more enjoyable and productive this term than the last one I was in.
So you said you're giving your shout out, maybe you've given your final remarks and sent your messages. Is there anyone in particular that you'd like to call out not necessarily in a bad or a malicious way, but someone that you'd like to see either be on the show or just want to generally bring attention to publicly?
I guess the big ticket ones here. If I'm gonna ruffle feathers, I might as well just ruffle feathers. Um, Both government candidates, or well, governor candidates, um, Maxine and Bex. Guys have done an excellent job in legislature this past term. Put in a lot of work. I don't agree with everything you've done, but at least it's a foundation to work with going into this next term. If you are voted into office, I genuinely am interested to see the rehabilitation that Bex has said that she's gone through. And Maxine, I'm excited to see kind of flourish into a leadership role. See how that goes. As for Damien Key and Gracie McCoy, Damien, I know that you get overwhelmed easily. I'd like to see you have a cooler head this term if you're voted in, and take the time to think for yourself and think critically. And if you need the time to kind of get your head straight, to take it. Gracie, I honestly haven't seen too much from you this past term. I'd like to see you kind of grow into your own role, working with Damien, but also taking initiative more as lieutenant governor. I think both sets of candidates. I am nervous about being in office, but I'm also excited to see, after watching the debates, it's clear that both sets have a lot of they have a lot of enthusiasm for the job. So I'm calling you guys out to show what you're saying in the debates and as your campaigns. I want you to put your money where your mouth is, basically. And hopefully I get to work with one set of you guys, and the other, I hope, will still be included in the process.
That is extremely wonderful. So, Joanna, you've given me a wonderful interview. Honestly, I'm surprised at how candid this was in comparison to the rest of them.
I appreciate that you recognize that. I try to be. A lot of people just kind of make assumptions about, like we said, about the whole law enforcement thing or government, or that I'm against people in general. But genuinely, I'll talk with just about anybody about anything.
No,
So this was very enjoyable.
Yeah, no, I just wasn't expecting it. Like, because as I said, I came in thinking, okay, this is an ex-detective, ex-judge, current politician. I'm probably gonna get a lot of, like, say nothing answers. But that's not what I received today. I received a genuine response from Joanna Poole, not the politician, the person. And that means a lot to me. So thank you for that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
That being said, this has been The Exchange with Jack Callow. I really hope you all have a wonderful night. I'll see you next time.